The concerns over tanking, I love that the Sixers say trust the process, but that really dresses it up when all you're doing is just trying to lose game.
Right.
You know, Mark Cuban came on my show recently and said, look, once we were out of it, we were tanking to see if we could get in a better position for the lottery. How do we prevent tanking?
First, I think Mark was being provocative, and I've talked to him about it since then. I mean, if you look at his record over the end of the season, I mean, I think there's a big difference. As you and I maybe would use the word tanking, which is teams intentionally losing, as opposed to putting young players out there, players you need to make decisions about and deciding whether there's guys you want to renew, whether there's guys you want to trade, et cetera. So, I just putting Mark Cuban's comment aside for a second, I think where he was being provocative was something he's said to me before, which is this is an area the league needs to take a fresh look at because, we put the lottery in place precisely for this reason, and that was well over 30 years ago because teams seemingly had this huge incentive to finish at the bottom because the value of these draft picks is so high, and we've tinkered with the draft lottery, I think, almost 5 times, in the last 30-plus years, but we're still not at the point where it's frankly working, and I recognize it's always going to be a balance as long as draft picks, especially top draft picks, are so strategically important for teams. They're going to have an incentive in certain cases to be at the bottom. But I think I've looked at a bunch of different proposals, everything from we should lock in from when a team record in March, and that should be the order of the draft. People have suggested, just flat out changing the odds. Changing the, making the curve flatter.
What if you can only be in a certain number of years? Like Philadelphia could be in back-to-back years. You can't be in 3 years in a row.
That's the problem is if a team is frankly genuinely bad, I mean the purpose of the draft, of course, is to help them rebuild and to help improve them. And so you end up in a situation where a team, maybe through no fault of their own, they're not part of any process, but they've been unlucky. They've had injuries. Players haven't panned out, and the question is, what is the purpose of the draft? And if you're saying we're gonna just create some bright line rule that you can't be in the lottery 3 years in a row or whatever it is, is that team going to be sort of locked into being bad? But that's just a quick reaction to it. I think that's something we have to look at as well. I would just say right now it's not working. And I mean, you look at European soccer, the other end of the spectrum,
relegation.
I mean, it is a problem, in this league when there's a bit of a free rider issue too, because in all the major leagues in the United States, each team gets an equal share of the national television money, whether or not you're the champion or you finish 30th in terms of the standings. And so also financially, there's not a great incentive. And when some of our owners also own clubs in the Premier League, for example, I mean, relegation, it completely changes the financial framework of your team, sets you back, maybe for a decade in some cases. So
what about if you did this, though,
huge incentive.
What if you said, once you're eliminated from the playoffs, then the clock is on, starts ticking, that the best record then gets the most ping pong balls out of the teams that have been eliminated. Therefore, the rest of the season, you're going to compete as hard as you can, and there's a reward at the end of the rainbow for being a bad team that is just not played that well.
It's an interesting idea, and I think that's one we should look at, too. I mean, some people have said, well, then what's the incentive for those players? They're playing incredibly hard so that a team, the better their performance is, the more likely they may get replaced by a draft pick. But there's a lot of smart people in this league, and a lot of smart commentators like you who have got some great ideas. And I mean it. And they come in through social media. I get lots of them come directly into my email, my inbox. So I know there's a problem now. I think this is why Mark said what he said on your show, and it's something that, again, we've experimented with so many different approaches over the years. It's why we have the lottery, but we're not in a great place when teams seemingly don't have an incentive to win at the end of the season, or even to run on a process for an entire season, as we've seen.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.